Welcome back. My name is Tom. You have found the NeuroArkitect channel, and my purpose here is to ultimately guide you into a better and more optimal state of health, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We focus so much on mental and emotional regulation here, and today's topic was inspired by a conversation, an interview I was listening to with Judd Brewer, Dr. Judd Brewer. He's the author of this incredible book called Unwinding Anxiety. And yeah, you guessed it, it's anxiety is the topic of today's conversation. Because he has such an interesting take on it. He's got such an interesting take on it. Treating anxiety as a habit that we need to break. In the same way we have all these other different habits. Anxiety being something that we can also just change our relationship to it, and then change sort of the behaviors that it triggers. So, rewind. Anxiety, right? We all experience it to some degree, right? And in fact, experiencing some levels of anxiety is actually a very healthy thing for the nervous system. Now, it really becomes detrimental and counterproductive and dysfunctional when we're chronically on high alert, hyper aroused, hyper vigilant. People, when I was doing a neurofeedback a couple of years ago, a lot of people that were coming to the office that said they had symptoms of anxiety or had been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, what I would very often see when we would run their brain maps and measure their EEG results, chronic, just activity, like hyperactive brains essentially. All I saw was red in terms of like their beta activity. It was just excessive. So their brains were overactive, so it was just on high alert. Again, hypervigilant, hyper aroused, constantly ruminating, and again, dysfunctional when it really starts to interfere with our lives, interferes with our ability to perform. It massively reduces our ability to focus and pay attention and actually regulate ourselves emotionally. We lose so much of our capacity to really utilize the full capacity of our frontal lobes, our area of the brain that allows us to make decisions, think long term, regulate ourselves and control our impulses, and again focus and pay attention and to be present, which does tie into this, by the way. And of course, I do encourage learning to regulate the nervous system by, again, calming it down through so many different practices. And yeah, of course, you want to make sure that you're sleeping and eating a nutrient-dense diet, and regulating your levels of inflammation inside the body, and so many other things. But even practices that include breathwork and meditation, and not the purpose right now of the conversation, but that's going to be the purpose of everything else we talk about. But today, just anxiety and treating it as a habit, is so interesting, right? Because now Dr. Judd Brewer, he's not necessarily approaching it at the root. What he's saying is, look at what happens when anxiety is triggered. What do we start to do? We start to worry. Now, why do we worry? That is the question, because worry is the habit. Worry is the consequence of the anxiety, right? Our brains hate uncertainty. The brain is essentially a predictive model. It likes to predict the future based on past events, based on what it knows, based on the information coming in. It wants some level of certainty with the outcome. And the past couple of years have been anything but certain, right? Now, mind you, pre-pandemic, we already had record high levels of anxiety and depression and stress and feeling burnt out and overwhelmed and suicide at its highest. Dr. Daniel Amen, who some of you may be familiar with his work and research, he runs the Amen clinics. I mean, this man has done tens of thousands of brain maps on individuals. He knows what this looks like, and he's seeing in his practice now children record high levels of depression, something he's never before until now seen in all his years, in all the decades he's been in practice. we have already been on a bad trajectory in terms of our ability to regulate, in terms of, again, lifestyle, all those things I just mentioned a moment ago. We are highly disconnected from ourselves and what it means to be full, thriving human beings. But the anxiety, what do we do about that? Brewer has an interesting take on this. Mind you, we also, last point, and you've heard me say this before, we will very often consume more information. We are literally inundated with information from so many different sources. We consume more in the span of a week than our ancestors did in a lifetime. There is no off switch for us anymore, guys. That is a huge component to this. So aside from just like being, highly uncertain, we're also just overstimulated. Worst possible combination there. The brain is constantly trying to find solutions to everything it's perceiving and receiving, and when there's uncertainty, it goes into high gear, trying to pull on more information because it's trying to get what it needs in order to create some sort of path, some sort of understanding, some certain direction forward. And sometimes we just throw ourselves into some sort of action because it makes us feel better, right? And worry is that action sometimes for some of us, because when there is no clear next step to take, we're just going to start to worry, and that becomes the default. And the more that we get anxious, the more we engage in a state of worry, right? That is the action that is being implemented, because it gives, at least we're worrying, at least we're doing something, right? Because action gives us a sense that there's some sort of progress being made. When was the last time that worry actually served us, though, right? And this is what Dr. Brewer makes a case for, is, we need to break that habit of the worry. Because again, the anxiety is a natural sort of response, right? But it's that worry that we engage in and then we get wrapped up in, that we're not able to break out of, that actually then really truly prevents us from really being effective and actually doing something about the things that are triggering the anxiety. So here's what here's what he recommends, of course, doing, and I'm gonna have my own spin on this as well. Dr. Brewer, he encourages you to actually first question yourself and ask yourself, what is this worry doing for me? What is it giving me? How does it make me feel? Chances are it's not doing anything positive, and it's not making you feel good, right? So really just recognizing inside yourself and questioning, it's like, what is this actually doing for me? You could do this for any habit that you want to change, really. It's just like, ask yourself, it's like, what does it feel? What does it do for me to binge eat chips late at night? How do I end up feeling? Well, I can't fall asleep until 3 a.m. and then I feel groggy and crummy the next day, and all those different things, right? I'm giving you an example. But the worry doesn't serve us, does it? And first you want to question it, and then you want to also become curious about what's happening. And this is where mindfulness plays in. So I said earlier about being present. Being present actually with the experience of the anxiety is profound, because you're teaching yourself that it's actually safe to be here right now. Because anxiety, again, is very often this preoccupation about this unknown future event, but here we are now in this present moment. So bringing it back to this present moment experience of the anxiety, and what does that feel like in the body? I felt it this morning when I opened up an email. That kind of triggered a little bit of that for me. And what I personally noticed was like this elevation of heat, slight increase in heart rate, almost this very strange tingling sensation that I personally experience when I do feel that. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, there it is. That's what that is. It's anxiety. I'm feeling it. Here's what I'm noticing. Oh, that's so interesting, right? Like approaching it with this level of curiosity, almost where you're just observing it, allowing it to pass through before you can just sort of like recenter yourself and again get present enough to then allow the brain to be a little more effective, where you're not just pulling all the resources into getting wrapped up in the worry. So again, questioning the worry, then getting mindful and curious about it. And going back to Dr. Daniel Amen, he has this very fun way, and I'm sure we already kind of do this to some degree, where he encourages just taking a more objective stance on the situation. And objectivity always helps all of us because we can pull ourselves out of, that sort of narrow focused tunnel vision, a myopic view that's coming just from my personal egoic small self. But actually just maybe even giving your anxiety, or even actually giving your brain a name, for that state. It's like, oh, I'm coming up with this on the fly. There's Josh. Fucking Josh. There's Josh. There's Josh doing that again. Well, let's see what Josh is doing. Let's see what he's up to. Let's see why. Creating more distance between yourself sometimes, and that helps tremendously. But again, being present, being mindful, being really in the experience without really trying to, again, judge it. The worst thing you can do is really judge it. And I say worse, and I'm judging it, but the worst thing you can do is truly judging the experience, not saying, oh, this is bad. I don't want to feel this. This is terrible. No, it's just like, this is what it is, right? Here's what it feels like. Let me get familiar with these sensations and actually now wire in the sense of, well, it's just a sensation. I'm safe. I'm okay. Like, here I am. Like, I'm whole. I'm okay. Like, we can work through this, and when you can then really sort of down-regulate from that place, then after, you actually are able to utilize more of all your cognitive faculties and resources, and you're able to see a more whole picture view of the situation. And sometimes there is no clear solution, but at least now you can move forward more effectively without being trapped in the worry, which really hinders our ability to show up and perform and do what we got to do. So those are my 2 cents for today. Inspired by this awesome interview, I highly encourage you guys to check it out. Actually, Judge Brewer has been in a series of interviews, and I have his book lying right underneath this one, Hardwiring Happiness, Rick Hansen. This PhD is just phenomenal. Originally done when I read Buddha's Brain. Wonderful neuroscience there. But Judson Brewer, right here. I kept saying Judson Brewer, Unwinding Anxiety, another phenomenal read. But I leave you with that. All right? Take that, work with it, utilize it. Let me know what you think, and let me know what your individual sort of tools and practices are when you do find yourself actually in this chronic state of being hypervigilant and anxious, and what helps you calm down so that way you can show up and be a little more effective. Guys, have a beautiful rest of your day, rest of your week, and I'm going to wish you much, much love. Peace out.